Devastated by the tragedy that took his wife and left his daughter in a wheelchair, a millionaire lives without hope. But one day, arriving home early, he catches the nanny dancing with his daughter, and the girl, for the first time in years, is laughing. The scene destroys him inside, realizing there was still life where he only saw pain. But what he did next, and the truths he discovered, shocked everyone irreversibly. The sprawling mansion on Lakeshore Drive stood as a monument to success, but its vast rooms echoed with silence. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stark contrast to the emotional darkness that had settled within those walls. Alexander Bennett gazed absently at the city lights, a glass of untouched bourbon dangling from his fingers. At 42, he had everything money could buy, a technology empire worth billions, properties across 3 continents, and a collection of luxury cars that gathered dust in the garage. What he didn't have anymore was the sound of laughter in his home. His daughter's therapist had called again, the 3rd one in 18 months. Like the others, Dr. Reynolds was regretfully informing Alexander that she could no longer continue treating 8-year-old Emma. The child was unresponsive, refusing to engage in any meaningful way. The gentle tap of his phone against the polished mahogany desk punctuated his frustration. 24 months had passed since the accident that had stolen his family's joy. In his mind's eye, he could still see the mangled wreckage of the SUV on that rainy October night. The same night, his wife Sophia slipped into a deep coma that doctors described as persistent vegetative state. The medical jargon couldn't mask the cruel reality. Sophia might never wake up, her body preserved in a private medical facility while her consciousness remained locked away. Emma had been in the back seat. The collision had damaged her spine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. But the physical injury paled compared to the emotional trauma. Once a vibrant child who danced ballet and sang loudly off-key, Emma now sat silently in her wheelchair, her eyes vacant, her voice silent. No tantrums, no tears, just a devastating emptiness. "Mr. Bennett?" His assistant's voice pulled him from the abyss of his thoughts. "Ms. Harding has arrived." Alexander straightened his posture, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Send her in." Rebecca Harding, his personal household manager, entered with a tablet and her perpetual look of composed efficiency. "The agency sent over profiles for new caretakers," she said, placing the tablet before him. "I've vetted them preliminarily, but you should make the final decision." Alexander barely glanced at the screen. "What's the point? We've been through 17 specialists in 2 years. None could reach her." Rebecca's professional demeanor softened slightly. "This candidate is different. She doesn't have the extensive credentials of the others, but her references are extraordinary." Alexander finally looked at the profile. Olivia Hayes, 28, degree in child psychology, experience in trauma recovery. What makes her different? She specializes in what she calls presence therapy. It's unconventional. She believes in treating children as children first, trauma victims second. Rebecca hesitated. The Richardsons credit her with bringing their son back from severe autism-related regression. The Wilsons say she helped their daughter speak again after selective mutism following abuse. Alexander's skepticism was written across his face. "Sounds like miracle claims." "I spoke with both families personally," Rebecca countered. "They were convincing." Alexander scrolled through Olivia's information. Unlike the clinical specialists with their pages of publications and accolades, her profile emphasized connection. There was something in her approach that spoke of humanity rather than methodology. "Fine," he conceded. "Have her start tomorrow, the usual arrangement." "There's one more thing," Rebecca added carefully. "She has a condition for employment." Alexander's eyebrows raised. Few people dared to place conditions on a man whose time was billed at thousands per hour. "Which is?" "She wants to live here in the house. She believes consistent presence is crucial for building trust." "Absolutely not." His response was immediate. The East Wing had remained untouched since the accident, Sophia's domain, with its music room where she once played piano while Emma danced. "The guest house is perfectly adequate." She was quite firm, Mr. Bennett. "She says children sense when adults are just visiting their pain versus living alongside it." Alexander stared out at the lake, weighing his daughter's needs against his own carefully maintained emotional barriers. 3 weeks. She has 3 weeks to show progress or she goes. The following morning, Alexander was in his home office when Olivia Hayes arrived. He had intentionally scheduled a video conference to avoid the awkward introductions and the pitying looks new specialists always gave. Through the security feed on his secondary monitor, he observed her arrival. She was younger than he expected, with auburn hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a bright yellow sweater, nothing like the formal attire of previous specialists. She carried just 2 bags and a colorful backpack covered in patches. As Rebecca showed her in, Alexander noticed Olivia taking in the mansion not with the usual awe, but with curious assessment, as if reading the home's emotional temperature. 2 hours later, his conference concluded, Alexander ventured toward Emma's suite. The house staff had strict instructions to text him if there were any issues with Emma or the new caretaker. His phone had remained silent, which was unusual for a first day. As he approached the doorway to Emma's room, Alexander slowed. Voices, actual voices, were coming from inside. One was clearly Olivia's, animated and warm. The other voice was so faint he could barely hear it, but it made his heart stutter in his chest. "So this one's name is Captain Whiskers," Olivia was saying. A whisper, barely audible, responded. Alexander moved closer to the doorway, careful to remain out of sight. Emma's room had been transformed. The sterile hospital-like arrangement was disrupted by what appeared to be a massive blanket fort, constructed from her bed sheets and chairs from around the house. Stuffed animals, long untouched, were positioned around it like sentries. Through a gap in the fabric, he could see Olivia sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Emma's wheelchair. Emma wasn't speaking in full sentences, but she was responding with tiny nods and one-word answers, as Olivia introduced herself to each of Emma's stuffed animals, giving them elaborate backstories. "And this elephant? What's the elephant's name?" Olivia held up a grey stuffed toy that had been Emma's constant companion before the accident. "Ellie," came the whispered response, so soft it was nearly imperceptible. Alexander froze, his hand gripping the doorframe. It was the first word he'd heard from his daughter in almost 2 years. His chest tightened painfully as he struggled to maintain his composure. "Ellie, the elephant." "I bet she's brave like you," Olivia said, her tone warm but matter-of-fact, not the exaggerated enthusiasm most adults used with Emma. Emma didn't smile, but her fingers reached out, tentatively touching the elephant's trunk. "Mr. Bennett." Rebecca's voice from behind him nearly made Alexander jump. "Sorry to interrupt, but your 3 o'clock call." Alexander turned, pressing a finger to his lips. Rebecca's eyes widened as she heard Emma's whisper from within the room. "Cancel it," Alexander mouthed silently. "Cancel everything today." For the first time in years, something more important than work demanded his attention. Inside the blanket fort, oblivious to their audience, Olivia continued. "You know what, Emma? I think it's only fair that since I've met your friends, you should meet mine." She reached into her colorful backpack and pulled out a worn, handmade puppet. "This is Mr. Bojangles. He's shy at first, but once he trusts you, he tells the best stories." As Olivia made the puppet bow with exaggerated formality, Alexander backed away from the door. He didn't want to interrupt whatever magic was happening in that room, the first glimmer of hope he'd seen in 24 months of darkness. That night, alone in his study, Alexander poured himself a rare second glass of bourbon. His mind replayed the whispered Ellie over and over. One word, such a small victory to anyone else, but to him, it was everything. 3 days passed, and Alexander found himself inventing reasons to work from home. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. Emma was still largely silent, but her eyes now tracked movement. She responded to questions with gestures, a slight nod, a tiny shake of her head. Once, when Olivia was telling a particularly animated story with her puppet collection, Alexander had glimpsed something that might have been the ghost of a smile. On the 4th morning, he entered the kitchen to find Olivia already there, arranging colorful fruit into a pattern on a plate. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she said, without looking up from her creation. "Emma and I are having a sunshine breakfast. Would you like to join us?" Alexander hesitated. His usual routine involved coffee in his study while reviewing overnight emails from international offices. "I have calls." "Of course," Olivia replied, her tone neutral but somehow making him feel as though he'd failed a test. "Emma mentioned you like blueberries, so I made extra." Alexander paused with his coffee mug halfway to his lips. Emma mentioned? She's speaking about me. Olivia looked up then, her green eyes direct. Not in full sentences, but when I asked about your favorite breakfast, she pointed to the blueberries. First purposeful communication about someone else. It's significant progress. Alexander stared at the plate where blueberries formed a meticulous ring around yellow mango, arranged like sun rays. His meetings suddenly seemed inconsequential. My calls can wait, he said, setting down his mug. What's involved in a sunshine breakfast? Olivia's smile was warm but professional. Just eating together while sharing one good thing we hope for today. Simple presence. When they entered Emma's room, Alexander was startled to find his daughter not in bed, but sitting in her wheelchair by the window, dressed in a yellow shirt that matched the mango on their plates. Her hair had been brushed and pulled back with a butterfly clip, another item long abandoned after the accident. Look who's joining us, Emma, Olivia announced, setting the colorful plate on the small table. Your dad's going to have sunshine breakfast too. Emma's eyes flicked to her father, then back to the window. No smile, but no withdrawal either. Alexander felt awkwardly formal as he pulled up a chair, hyper-aware of how long it had been since he'd done more than briefly check on his daughter before or after work. The sunshine pattern was Emma's design, Olivia explained, casually cutting fruit into bite-sized pieces. She has quite the artistic eye. Alexander watched as Emma's small hand reached for a blueberry. Unprompted, she placed it in her mouth, another small miracle. Before Olivia's arrival, meals had been struggles of coaxing and eventual resignation to nutritional supplements. So, Olivia continued, sunshine breakfast rules. We each share one bright hope for today. Mine is that the rain holds off until after lunch, because I promised Emma we'd go to the garden today. She looked expectantly at Alexander. He cleared his throat. I hope my Tokyo team resolved their software issue overnight so we can proceed with the launch. Olivia nodded, but her slight frown suggested his answer wasn't quite in the spirit of the exercise. And Emma? What's your sunshine hope? Emma remained silent, eyes downcast. Would you like me to tell your dad what you showed me earlier? Olivia asked gently. A tiny nod. Emma hopes the birds come back to the birdhouse outside her window. We put out new seed yesterday. Alexander glanced at the window where indeed a birdhouse hung from a nearby branch, something he hadn't even noticed. How much of his daughter's world had he missed while buried in his grief and work? The breakfast continued, with Olivia maintaining easy conversation, never pressuring Emma to speak, but always including her, interpreting her small gestures as though they were full contributions to the discussion. By the time they finished eating, Alexander had learned more about his daughter's current interests and feelings than he had in months of reports from previous specialists. Mr. Bennett, Olivia said as they were finishing, Emma and I have a garden expedition planned for 11. Would you like to join us? Before he could formulate an excuse, Emma's hand moved across the table. Her small fingers briefly, so briefly he might have imagined it, touched his hand. Not quite a grab, barely a graze, but intentional contact. I'll clear my schedule, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. The garden expedition turned out to involve a treasure map Olivia had created, leading them through the extensive grounds of the Bennett estate. Emma directed their journey by pointing at landmarks drawn on the map. At each stop, Olivia had hidden small trinkets, a blue marble, a tiny bird figurine, a packet of wildflower seeds. Alexander pushed Emma's wheelchair along the garden paths, feeling strangely self-conscious. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spent an hour simply playing. Olivia walked alongside them, sometimes narrating elaborate stories about the ancient explorers who had left these treasures, other times falling silent to let Emma absorb the environment. She's doing well with the uneven ground, Olivia observed as they navigated a pebbled section of path. The wheelchair is top of the line, Alexander replied. Adaptive suspension, terrain response system. I meant Emma, Olivia clarified gently. Some children with trauma find unpredictable sensations triggering. The fact that she's comfortable with the bumps suggests she feels secure right now. Alexander considered this. He had spent hundreds of thousands on equipment and specialists focusing on the technical aspects of Emma's care. How had he missed the simple emotional components? At the final stop on their treasure hunt, a small pond where golden koi fish swam lazily, Olivia handed Emma a special prize, a small kaleidoscope. As Emma held it to her eye, turning it slowly to watch the patterns change, Alexander noticed something extraordinary. His daughter's free hand was moving, fingers dancing slightly in her lap, mimicking the shifting patterns she saw. "She's stimming," Olivia said quietly, noting his observation. "Isn't that bad?" The last therapist mentioned restricting repetitive movements. Olivia shook her head. "In this case, it's communication. Her body is telling us she's engaged, processing beauty. Look at her face." Emma's expression had changed. The perpetual blank mask had softened, her eyes wide with interest, the tiniest curve at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to joy Alexander had seen since the accident. "This is how she's meant to be," Olivia said softly. "Children process the world through play and exploration. Trauma freezes them, but they're still in there, waiting." That evening, after Emma had been settled in bed, Alexander invited Olivia to his study. She sat across from him, looking somewhat out of place in her casual clothes, amid the leather and mahogany formality. "You've accomplished more in 4 days than specialists with decades of experience managed in months," he said, not bothering to hide his amazement. "How?" Olivia considered his question carefully before answering. "Most specialists approach Emma as a case to solve. I'm just treating her as Emma. That seems oversimplified. With respect, Mr. Bennett, that's part of the problem. Adults complicate what children need. Emma doesn't need elaborate therapeutic protocols right now. She needs to feel safe enough to exist in her body and mind again." Olivia leaned forward. The accident took more than her mobility. It took her sense of predictability, her belief that the world is safe. "We are just rebuilding that, one blueberry and treasure hunt at a time." Alexander studied the young woman before him. "Your contract stipulated 3 weeks. Given the progress, I'd like to extend it indefinitely." "Thank you, but my approach works in stages. I'll stay as long as Emma needs me. But my goal is always to work myself out of a job." She smiled. "The real healing happens when children reconnect with their primary attachments, in Emma's case with you." Alexander felt a flicker of alarm. "I'm not equipped for this. I run a tech company, not a therapeutic program." "You're her father. That's the only qualification that matters to Emma." Olivia stood, straightening her sweater. "Tomorrow we're making a sensory board. She specifically indicated she wants to include something from your office, that silver stress ball on your desk. She associates it with you." After Olivia left, Alexander remained in his study, contemplating the small silver ball he often fidgeted with during difficult calls. Emma had noticed. Despite his emotional absence, his daughter had been cataloging details about him, maintaining their connection in whatever way she could. For the first time since the accident, Alexander allowed himself to feel something beyond the numb efficiency that had carried him through each day. He had been surviving, not living, much like Emma. Perhaps it was time they both learned how to truly live again. 2 weeks into Olivia's tenure, the Bennett household had transformed. The once sterile museum-like mansion now bore evidence of life. A finger-painting station in the sunroom, wind chimes hanging from the patio, and colorful sticky notes with simple words and images appearing on various surfaces. Olivia's gentle method of encouraging Emma's reading skills to re-emerge. Alexander found himself drawn into their world, rearranging meetings and delegating tasks he would have previously handled personally. The morning sunshine breakfasts had become a ritual he was reluctant to miss. Emma's progress, while still measured in small victories, was undeniable. She now consistently responded to questions with gestures, occasionally whispered single words, and had begun using a tablet communication app Olivia introduced. "Movement is language too," Olivia explained one afternoon as they watched Emma in the garden, her small hands carefully arranging pebbles in patterns only she understood. Her body is remembering how to express what her voice still struggles with. The most significant breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday. Alexander had been trapped in his study with an investment crisis for most of the day. Emerging finally at dusk, he heard music echoing through the hallway, a cheerful children's song he vaguely recognized from Emma's pre-accident days. Following the sound, he found himself at the doorway of the mansion's casual living room, a space rarely used since the accident. The furniture had been pushed back, creating an open area where Olivia was dancing, moving with uninhibited joy to the music. Around her, Emma sat in her wheelchair watching intently. Alexander remained frozen in the doorway, unwilling to interrupt. Olivia spun in a playful circle, then knelt beside Emma. "Your turn, sunshine," she said, her voice carrying over the music. "Remember what we practiced? Little moves count too." To Alexander's astonishment, Emma raised her arms slightly and began to move them in time with the music. Not dramatic gestures, but deliberate, rhythmic movements. Her face remained serious in concentration, but her body was dancing, communicating through motion what words still couldn't express. Olivia continued dancing around the wheelchair, occasionally mirroring Emma's arm movements, creating a duet of sorts. "That's it. Now try the head movement we practiced." Emma tilted her head from side to side in time with the music, her fine motor control impressive given her long period of withdrawal. Alexander must have made some sound because Emma's eyes suddenly locked with his. Instead of stopping or retreating into herself as he feared she might, his daughter did something miraculous. She raised her hand higher, a clear invitation for him to see what she was doing. "Mr. Bennett," Olivia called over the music, unsurprised by his presence. "Perfect timing, we're having a dance party. Emma is showing me her moves." Alexander stepped fully into the room, feeling awkwardly formal in his business attire. "I see that. She's dancing." "We all are," Olivia corrected with a smile that suggested he was missing the point. "Or we will be." Emma requested a family dance party. The implication was clear. Emma watched him expectantly, her small hands still moving to the rhythm. Alexander couldn't remember the last time he had danced, perhaps at a charity gala, performing obligatory formal steps with some business associate's wife. Certainly not since before the accident. Not since Sophia. "I don't really dance," he said stiffly. Olivia's expression remained encouraging. "No one really dances. We just move how the music makes us feel." "Right, Emma?" Emma's hand extended toward him, fingers opening and closing in a reaching gesture he couldn't ignore. Loosening his tie, Alexander stepped further into the room. "I suppose I could try." The next song was one with a prominent beat, something contemporary that he vaguely recognized from radio play. Alexander began with small, self-conscious movements, hyper-aware of how ridiculous he must look, but Emma's attention was focused entirely on him, her eyes tracking his every move with more engagement than he'd seen in 2 years. "She likes it when you spin," Olivia suggested, demonstrating a playful turn. Feeling foolish but unwilling to disappoint his daughter, Alexander attempted an awkward spin. Emma's reaction was instantaneous. A sound escaped her, something between a gasp and a giggle, the first laugh-like sound she'd made since the accident. Emboldened, Alexander continued, his movements becoming less restrained. Olivia danced nearby, sometimes creating a circle around Emma's wheelchair, sometimes encouraging Emma's own movements. The three of them formed an unlikely ensemble, moving to the music in a room that had been silent for too long. When Alexander executed a particularly dramatic spin that sent his tie flying, the sound came again, unmistakably a giggle this time. Emma was laughing. Her eyes were bright with an emotion he hadn't dared hope to see again. Joy. The music shifted to a slower song. Without prompting, Alexander moved behind Emma's wheelchair and began to push her gently in time with the music, creating a dance that incorporated her chair rather than worked around it. Olivia followed their lead, adjusting her own movements to complement theirs. "You're a natural," she said quietly to Alexander, her expression warm with approval. For 3 songs, they continued their impromptu dance party. Emma's participation grew more animated, her arms moving more freely, occasional sounds of pleasure escaping her. Alexander found his own tensions melting away as he focused entirely on the present moment, on his daughter's happiness and the simple pleasure of movement. When the final song ended, Emma's tablet chimed with a notification, a timer Olivia had set. "That's our signal for cool-down and evening routine," Olivia explained. "Consistent schedules help with Emma's sense of security." Emma's hand reached for the tablet, her fingers moving across the screen with purpose. A computerized voice emerged. "Again tomorrow?" Alexander knelt beside his daughter's wheelchair, meeting her eyes directly. "Yes, Emma. Again tomorrow. I promise." That evening, after Emma had been settled for the night, Alexander invited Olivia to join him on the terrace. The Chicago skyline glittered before them, the air crisp with early autumn. She laughed today, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound. Olivia nodded, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the breeze. Laughter is one of the first things trauma takes, and one of the most important to reclaim. It's a huge milestone. When I first hired you, I assumed your methods were too simplistic, Alexander admitted. Dance parties and treasure hunts seemed insufficient for the depth of her trauma. Joy isn't frivolous, Mr. Bennett, it's essential, especially for children. Olivia's expression grew serious. Emma's mind protected her by shutting down after the accident. To counter that, we need to make being present in her body and emotions rewarding again. Alexander contemplated this as he gazed at the city lights. I made the same mistake, he said finally. After the accident, I shut everything down except work. I thought I was being strong for Emma, but really I was just afraid to feel anything. It's not too late to change that, Olivia said gently. Emma responds to you more than to me. She watches you constantly, even when you don't notice. She's taking her cues about whether it's safe to re-engage with life from you. The weight of this responsibility settled on Alexander's shoulders, not as a burden, but as a clarifying purpose. I've been planning to visit Sophia this weekend, he said, referring to his routine solo visits to the medical facility where his wife remained unresponsive. Do you think... Should Emma come with me? Olivia considered this carefully. Has she been to see her mother since the initial hospitalization? Alexander shook his head. The doctors advised against it. They said seeing her mother in that condition might deepen her trauma. With respect, Mr. Bennett, absence creates its own trauma. Emma likely has fantasies about her mother's condition that may be worse than reality. Children need concrete experiences to process, even difficult ones. Olivia paused. But she should be prepared first. We could use social stories, look at pictures, practice what to expect. As they discussed the logistics of such a visit, Alexander found himself studying Olivia with new appreciation. Beyond her professional capabilities, he was beginning to see her as a person. The small scar near her eyebrow, the way she used her hands when explaining important concepts, her quiet but unmistakable confidence. You never talk about yourself, he observed when there was a lull in the conversation. Olivia smiled slightly. That's because I'm not the important story here. Still, Emma and I know very little about the person who's become such a significant part of our lives. Something in Olivia's expression shifted, a brief vulnerability quickly masked by professionalism. There's not much to tell. I grew up in foster care, bounced between 16 homes before aging out of the system. That experience taught me how children communicate when words fail them. She shrugged. I put myself through school, found my calling working with traumatized children, and here I am. Alexander sensed there was much more to her story, but he respected her boundaries. Well, Emma and I are fortunate that your path led you here. The moment lingered between them, professional but warming, with something that might, in different circumstances, have evolved into friendship. Then Olivia stood, professional boundaries reinstated. Tomorrow we're trying water therapy in the pool, she said. Emma indicated she might be ready. Would you like to join us? I wouldn't miss it, Alexander replied, realizing he meant it completely. As Olivia bid him good night and disappeared back into the house, Alexander remained on the terrace, contemplating how quickly this young woman had dismantled the protective walls he'd built around his and Emma's lives, and how grateful he was that she had. The planned visit to Sophia was carefully orchestrated. Over 3 days, Olivia helped Emma prepare with picture books about hospitals, role-play with her stuffed animals, and honest, age-appropriate conversations about what to expect. Alexander found himself equally grateful for the preparation, realizing how he'd been avoiding his own emotions about his wife's condition. The morning of their visit dawned clear and crisp. Emma wore a yellow dress she had specifically selected through her communication tablet, and Alexander noticed she had asked Olivia to place a small daisy in her hair. "Mommy's favorite," Emma had whispered when asked about her choice. The private medical facility was discreet and luxurious, designed to feel more like a retreat than a hospital. As Alexander pushed Emma's wheelchair through the familiar corridors, he felt her small hand reach back to grasp his. "It's okay to be nervous," he assured her, squeezing her fingers gently. "I get nervous too, every time." Olivia walked slightly behind them, a supportive presence without intruding on the family moment. She carried Emma's tablet and a small bag with comfort items they had packed together, a soft blanket, Ellie the elephant, and a drawing Emma had created for her mother. When they reached Sophia's suite, Alexander paused, kneeling beside Emma's wheelchair. "Remember what we talked about? Mommy looks like she's sleeping. She has some machines helping her breathe and monitoring her heart. The doctors are taking excellent care of her." Emma nodded solemnly, her eyes wide but determined. Inside, the room was bathed in soft, natural light from large windows overlooking a Japanese-inspired garden. Sophia lay still on the bed, her blonde hair arranged neatly on the pillow, her face peaceful despite the tubes and monitoring equipment. Classical music played softly, part of the sensory stimulation program Alexander had insisted upon. Emma's reaction was not what Alexander had feared. There was no screaming, no regression into catatonia. Instead, his daughter studied her mother with intense focus, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "She looks like Sleeping Beauty," Emma whispered, the most complete sentence she had spoken in months. Alexander felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Yes, she does." With unexpected confidence, Emma directed her wheelchair forward until she was right beside the bed. She reached out slowly, placing her small hand over her mother's. "Hi, Mommy," she said softly. "I brought you a flower." The visit continued with remarkable calm. Emma spoke more words to her unconscious mother than she had to anyone in the past 2 years, telling her about her dance party with Daddy, about Olivia, about the birds in the garden. Alexander stood back, witnessing a one-sided conversation that nonetheless seemed to provide his daughter with profound comfort. Olivia remained a quiet, supportive presence, occasionally helping Emma with her tablet when words failed her, but mostly allowing the mother-daughter connection to unfold naturally. After 30 minutes, Emma signaled she was ready to leave. As Alexander prepared to wheel her out, she made an unexpected request through her tablet. "Can Olivia and I have a minute with Mommy?" "Girl talk." Though surprised, Alexander nodded. "Of course, sweetheart, I'll wait just outside." In the hallway, he found himself pacing, curious about what girl talk his daughter might want to have with her mother and Olivia. When they emerged 5 minutes later, Emma seemed peaceful, if tired, and Olivia's eyes held a hint of moisture. She quickly blinked away. The drive home was quiet, Emma eventually falling asleep in her specialized car seat. When they arrived at the mansion, Alexander carried his daughter inside himself, rather than waiting for the nurse to transfer her, another change in their evolving relationship. That evening, after Emma was settled in bed, Alexander found Olivia in the garden, sitting on a bench beneath the oak tree, where they had hung wind chimes during their second week of sensory enrichment. "Thank you for today," he said, joining her on the bench. "It went better than I could have hoped." Olivia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Emma is stronger than any of you realized. Children often are." "May I ask what the girl talk was about?" Alexander ventured. "Emma wanted to show her mother the new hair clip I gave her," Olivia explained, "and she wanted to tell her something private. I promised it would stay between us girls." Alexander accepted this with a nod. "Fair enough. I'm just glad to see her communicating her needs so clearly." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the wind chimes' gentle melody. Alexander was about to speak again when his phone buzzed with an incoming call. Checking the screen, he frowned. "I need to take this. It's the security team at the front gate." The call was brief but concerning. "There's someone at the gate claiming to be family," he explained to Olivia after hanging up. "She doesn't have an appointment or clearance." Before Olivia could respond, his phone chimed with a security video feed. Alexander stared at the screen, his face draining of color. "What is it?" Olivia asked, alarmed by his reaction. "It's impossible," he whispered, showing her the screen. The woman at the gate was identical to Sophia. The same blonde hair, the same delicate features, though her expression held none of his wife's natural warmth. "I didn't know Sophia had a twin," Olivia said carefully. "She doesn't. At least she never mentioned one." Alexander's mind raced. Her parents died when she was young. She was raised by her grandmother, who never spoke of a sister. Alexander called the gate again. "Send her to the main house. I'll meet her there." As they walked quickly back to the mansion, Alexander explained the little he knew. Sophia was adopted as an infant. Her birth records were sealed. She never expressed interest in finding her biological family, said her adoptive parents were her real family. People sometimes hide parts of their past, Olivia suggested gently, especially painful ones. In the formal living room, they waited. Alexander paced while Olivia sat calmly, though he noticed her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the first sign of unease he'd seen in her. The sound of heels clicking on marble announced their visitor before the butler could formally introduce her. "Catherine Wilson," she announced herself, sweeping into the room with practiced confidence. The resemblance to Sophia was uncanny, yet there were subtle differences beyond styling. Catherine's expression was sharper, her movements more calculated. Where Sophia had radiated genuine warmth, this woman projected a carefully constructed charm. "Alexander Bennett," Catherine said, extending a manicured hand. "After all this time, we finally meet. I'm Sophia's sister, her twin, as you can see." Alexander shook her hand automatically, still processing the shock. Sophia never mentioned having a sister. Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, she wouldn't have. We were separated as infants. Different adoptive families sealed records. I only discovered her existence 3 years ago and have been trying to find her ever since." She glanced around the opulent room. "When I finally located her, I learned about the unfortunate accident." "How did you find us?" Alexander asked, his businessman's skepticism emerging through the shock. "DNA ancestry website. I submitted my sample years ago, hoping to find biological relatives. When Sophia did the same, was it for Emma's school genetics project? The system flagged us as identical matches." Catherine's gaze landed on Olivia. "And you are?" "Olivia Hayes." "I work with Emma." Something flickered in Catherine's expression, a momentary hardness quickly masked by sympathy. "My poor niece. How is she coping?" "She's making progress," Alexander said carefully, unwilling to share details with this stranger, regardless of her genetic connection to his wife. "I'd love to meet her," Catherine said, moving further into the room and settling onto the sofa as if she belonged there. "I've been overseas for the past 2 years, Asia mostly. When I returned and learned what happened, well, I felt I should come. Family should stick together in times of crisis, don't you think?" Alexander remained standing. "Emma is asleep. She's on a strict routine that's been helping her recovery." Catherine nodded, though Alexander noticed a flash of irritation cross her features. "Of course, another time. I'm staying at the Four Seasons downtown. Perhaps I could come back tomorrow. I'd like to help however I can. After all, I'm the closest thing to her mother that poor child has now." The presumption in her statement struck Alexander like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Olivia spoke up. "Emma's routine is quite structured. Perhaps Mr. Bennett could contact you when there's an appropriate time for a brief introduction." Catherine's gaze snapped to Olivia, assessing her with new interest. "You seem very invested in my niece's care, Ms. Hayes." "That's her job," Alexander interjected, uncomfortable with the sudden tension. "Olivia has been instrumental in Emma's recent progress." "How wonderful," Catherine said, her tone suggesting anything but. "Well, I won't intrude further tonight. But Alexander, we really should discuss Sophia's condition privately. As her only living blood relative, I naturally have concerns about her ongoing care." The implication was clear. Catherine was positioning herself for some kind of involvement in Sophia's medical decisions. Alexander felt a cold unease settle in his stomach. "I'll have my assistant contact you to arrange a meeting," he said formally. "Now, if you'll excuse us, it's been a long day." After Catherine had been escorted out, Alexander turned to Olivia. "What do you make of that?" Olivia chose her words carefully. "It's unusual timing, and children are very sensitive to authenticity. If you do arrange a meeting with Emma, I'd suggest keeping it brief and supervised initially." Alexander nodded, grateful for her measured response. "I'll have my team verify her identity and claims before any further contact." Something doesn't feel right. That night, long after Olivia had retired to her room in the East Wing, Alexander sat in his study reviewing security footage of Catherine's visit. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong about her sudden appearance. Why now after 2 years? And why had Sophia never mentioned even the possibility of a biological sister? On impulse, he pulled up photos of Sophia on his tablet. Happy moments from before the accident. Side by side with the security images of Catherine, the resemblance was undeniable, yet he could see differences that went beyond styling. Sophia's smile had always reached her eyes, Her expressions were open, unguarded. Catherine moved through the world with a calculated precision that his wife had never possessed. Perhaps more telling was his own reaction. Despite Catherine being physically identical to the woman he had loved for over a decade, he felt no emotional connection to her, only a growing wariness that he couldn't yet explain. Alexander postponed Catherine's meeting with Emma for 3 days, citing his daughter's routine and requesting time to process this unexpected development. During those days, he had his security team conduct a thorough background check on Catherine Wilson. The preliminary findings appeared to support her story. Catherine Wilson had indeed been born on the same day as Sophia in the same hospital in Portland. Her adoption records were sealed, but her passport showed extensive travel throughout Asia over the past 2 years. She had a modest apartment in Seattle, worked remotely as a freelance graphic designer, and had no criminal record. Everything checks out on paper, his head of security reported. But there are gaps in her digital footprint, periods where she seems to disappear from social media, credit card usage, everything. Not suspicious in itself, but unusual in today's connected world. When Alexander finally agreed to a meeting, he arranged for it to take place in the garden, neutral territory where Emma would feel comfortable, but that held no special emotional significance. The morning of the meeting, he found Olivia helping Emma select an outfit. "How much have you told her?" he asked as Emma sorted through her clothes with more interest than she'd shown in personal choices before Olivia's arrival. "Just that someone who looks like her mom wants to meet her," Olivia replied. "I explained that sometimes people can look very similar, even if they're different people, like the twins in her picture book. I emphasized that this person is new to us, and we're all just getting to know her together." Alexander nodded, grateful for Olivia's straightforward approach. "And how did she respond?" "She asked if her mom had sent this person to check on her." Olivia's expression was carefully neutral. "I said no, that her mom is still at the special hospital, but that this person is related to her mom and wants to meet her." Emma selected a blue dress with butterflies, one of her favorites from before the accident. As Olivia helped her into it, the child seemed contemplative rather than anxious. "Do you want to talk about meeting your aunt today?" Alexander asked, kneeling to be at eye level with her wheelchair. Emma considered this, then reached for her tablet. After a moment of typing, the electronic voice spoke. "Will she stay a long time?" The question held more insight than Alexander had expected. "No, sweetheart, just a short visit today." Catherine arrived precisely at the appointed time, dressed in an elegant but casual outfit that Alexander recognized as similar to something Sophia might have worn. Her hair was styled differently today, closer to how Sophia had worn hers. The effect was unsettling. "Alexander," she greeted him warmly, leaning in to kiss his cheek, a familiarity he wasn't prepared for. "Thank you for arranging this. I've been so looking forward to meeting my niece." As they walked toward the garden, Catherine spoke continuously about her travels, her career, her apartment in Seattle, filling the air with details of a life Alexander had no connection to. He noted that she asked few questions about Emma or Sophia, despite claiming concern for both. In the garden, Emma and Olivia were already waiting by the koi pond, engaged in what appeared to be a game involving colored stones placed along the water's edge. Emma looked up as they approached, her expression shifting from relaxed engagement to intense focus as she registered Catherine's appearance. "Emma," Alexander said gently, "this is Catherine. She's your mum's sister." For a long moment, Emma simply stared, her eyes moving over Catherine's face with the careful assessment children often bring to new situations. Then, unexpectedly, she backed her wheelchair away slightly. A physical retreat that Alexander immediately recognized as significant. If Catherine noticed the reaction, she didn't acknowledge it. "Hello, Emma. My goodness, you look just like your mother did at your age. I've brought you something." She produced a small jewelry box from her purse, a special bracelet from my travels. "I thought we could be bracelet buddies." Emma made no move to accept the gift, her hands remaining firmly in her lap. "Perhaps later," Alexander suggested, noting his daughter's discomfort. "Emma sometimes needs time to warm up to new people." Catherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. It must be confusing, seeing someone who looks so much like your mother." She turned to Olivia with a less genuine smile. "And Ms. Hayes, still here, I see. I've been meaning to ask about your qualifications. Alexander mentioned you've been instrumental in Emma's care. Ms. Hayes has a degree in child psychology, with a specialization in trauma recovery, Alexander interjected, disliking Catherine's tone. Her approach has helped Emma make significant progress. How wonderful, Catherine replied, in the same dismissive tone she'd used during their first meeting. Though I wonder if family might be more beneficial in the long term. After all, no one understands a child like family. The pointed comment hung in the air. Olivia maintained her professional composure, but Alexander noticed her shift slightly closer to Emma, whose discomfort was becoming more apparent. The child was now fidgeting with the communication tablet in her lap, though she hadn't yet typed anything. Perhaps we should show Catherine the koi fish, Olivia suggested, diplomatically redirecting the conversation. Emma's been helping name them. This neutral topic carried them through the next few minutes, with Catherine making appropriate comments about the fish, while continually finding ways to touch Alexander's arm or shoulder, casual contacts that seemed designed to establish intimacy. Each time he subtly created distance without being overtly rude. After 15 minutes, Emma typed into her tablet, "Tired now?" "I think that's our cue to wrap up," Alexander said, recognizing both the literal message and the unspoken request to end the visit. "But we've hardly had any time together," Catherine protested, her voice taking on a harder edge before she quickly softened it. "I mean, I've come all this way, and I so wanted to get to know my niece." "Emma's routine is important to her recovery," Olivia explained gently. "Short, positive interactions help build comfort for future visits." Catherine's gaze, when it landed on Olivia, was distinctly cold. "I wasn't aware household staff made decisions about family interactions." Before Alexander could respond to this clear attempt to undermine Olivia's position, Emma's tablet spoke again. "Olivia stays. You go." The blunt directive hung in the air. Catherine's expression flickered between shock and something darker, before settling into a forced smile. "Well, children can be so direct, can't they?" Another time then. As they walked back toward the house, Catherine maintained a stream of light conversation, but Alexander could sense her tightly controlled anger. At the front door, she turned to him. "I'd like to see Sophia tomorrow, if possible. As her sister, I should be involved in her care decisions." Alexander maintained his businesslike demeanor. "I'll have to check with the medical facility about their visitor protocols. They're quite strict about non-immediate family." "But I'm her twin," Catherine insisted, a sharp edge entering her voice. "Genetically, no one is closer to her than I am. I understand, but legally I'm her next of kin and medical proxy. There are procedures that have to be followed." Alexander kept his tone neutral but firm. "I'll have my assistant contact you about arrangements." After Catherine had departed, Alexander found Olivia and Emma in the sunroom, engaged in what appeared to be a calming sensory activity with textured fabrics. "Emma wanted some quiet time," Olivia explained. "New social interactions can be overwhelming." Alexander nodded, sitting nearby but not interrupting their activity. After a few minutes, Emma looked up at him and typed on her tablet. "Don't like her." The simple statement confirmed his own instincts. "I noticed you seemed uncomfortable. Can you tell me why?" Emma's brow furrowed in concentration as she carefully typed her response. Wrong smile. "Not like Mommy." Alexander exchanged a glance with Olivia, impressed by his daughter's perceptiveness. "I noticed that too," he acknowledged. Later that evening, after Emma had been settled for the night, Alexander found Olivia in the kitchen making tea. Emma's reaction was telling, she said as she heard him enter. "Children often pick up on authenticity, or lack thereof, more quickly than adults." Alexander leaned against the counter, accepting the cup of tea she offered. "What's your professional assessment?" Olivia considered her response carefully. "My concern is Emma's well-being, not making judgments about family members." That said, Emma clearly experienced distress in Catherine's presence, and her progress is still fragile. She paused. "If you're asking whether I think continued exposure to Catherine would be beneficial for Emma right now, my professional opinion is no." Before Alexander could respond, his phone chimed with a notification. The security system had detected movement at the front gate. Checking the app, he was surprised to see Catherine's car returning. "She's back," he said, showing Olivia the screen. "At this hour?" They watched as Catherine spoke into the intercom. Alexander turned up the volume on his phone to hear. "I left my sunglasses in your living room," Catherine was saying to the guard. "I have an early flight tomorrow and need them tonight." Alexander frowned. She didn't mention any flight, and I don't recall seeing sunglasses. The security guard was following protocol, calling the main house for approval. Alexander hesitated, then instructed him to allow Catherine in, but escort her directly to the front door, where he would meet her. Something doesn't feel right, he told Olivia. She's been pushing for access to both Emma and Sophia since she arrived. Trust your instincts, Olivia advised. You know your family better than anyone. When Catherine arrived at the door, her demeanor had changed. Gone was the carefully maintained charm, replaced by a more direct, almost aggressive energy. Alexander, thank you for letting me return, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I realized I left my sunglasses, and I simply can't leave without them. Designer, you know, terribly expensive. Of course, Alexander replied coolly, though I don't recall seeing them in the living room. They might have fallen between the cushions, Catherine suggested, already moving toward the formal living room. I'll just take a quick look. Alexander followed, increasingly certain that the sunglasses were merely a pretext. In the living room, Catherine made a show of checking the sofa where she had sat earlier. Perhaps they're in another room. I did take a brief tour with your housekeeper. Without waiting for permission, she moved toward the hallway that led to the family's private quarters. Catherine, Alexander said firmly, those areas are not open to guests. If you've lost your sunglasses, I'll have the staff look for them tomorrow and contact you. Catherine turned, her expression hardening. Don't be ridiculous, Alexander. I'm hardly a guest, I'm family. Sophia would want me to be involved in Emma's life, to be a maternal figure for her. You've known about Emma for less than a week, Alexander pointed out. And you've never met Sophia, so you can't presume to know what she would want. I know her better than you think, Catherine replied, her tone shifting into something colder. Twins have a connection that transcends distance. I've felt her presence my entire life. Alexander's unease deepened. It's late, and I need to ask you to leave. If your sunglasses turn up, I'll have them delivered to your hotel. For a moment, Catherine stood perfectly still, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then her demeanor changed completely, softening into apologetic charm. You're right, of course. How thoughtless of me to impose at this hour. I'm just so eager to be part of Emma's life, to help however I can. She moved toward the door, then paused. I do hope you'll reconsider allowing me to visit Sophia. I've dreamed of meeting my sister for so long. After she had gone, Alexander activated the enhanced security protocols on the estate, a system he rarely used, but that would alert him to any unauthorized access attempts. Something about Catherine's behavior had triggered his protective instincts, and years in business had taught him to trust those instincts. As he walked through the quiet house toward his own quarters, he passed Emma's room. To his surprise, a soft light was visible beneath the door. Gently pushing it open, he found Olivia sitting beside Emma's bed, reading quietly from a children's book. Emma was awake, clutching Ellie the elephant tightly. Couldn't sleep, he asked softly. Emma's small face was solemn as she nodded. She had a nightmare, Olivia explained, about someone taking her away. Alexander entered the room fully, sitting on the edge of the bed. No one is going to take you away, Emma. I promise. Emma reached for her tablet, typing slowly. The wrong smile lady wants to. The simple statement, delivered in the electronic voice, sent a chill through Alexander. Children's intuition, he was learning, was a powerful thing, one he would not ignore. I won't let her, he promised, taking his daughter's small hand in his. You're safe here with me and Olivia. As Emma finally drifted back to sleep, Alexander and Olivia stepped into the hallway, keeping the door ajar. I'm going to restrict Catherine's access to the property, he said quietly. Something isn't right, and until I figure out what, I want her nowhere near Emma. Olivia nodded. I think that's wise. Emma's fear seems specific, not just general anxiety about a new person. I've asked my team to dig deeper into Catherine's background, Alexander admitted. The preliminary check was too surface level. I want to know where she really was for the past 2 years and how she learned about Sophia's condition. As they stood in the dimly lit hallway, a strange sense of alignment settled between them, no longer merely employer and employee, but allies in protecting Emma from a threat, neither fully understood but both instinctively recognized. 3 days passed with no contact from Catherine. Alexander's enhanced security team found no attempts to access the property. But their deeper investigation into her background revealed troubling inconsistencies. The Seattle apartment existed, but neighbors reported rarely seeing its occupant. Her freelance design business had a professional website, but few verifiable clients. Most concerning was the discovery that while Catherine had indeed been traveling during the past 2 years, her destinations didn't match her claims. Instead of Asia, her passport showed multiple entries to Chicago. "She's been here," Alexander told Olivia as they reviewed the security report in his study. "Not traveling through Asia, as she claimed, but right here in the same city as Sophia's medical facility." Olivia frowned, processing this information. "Has she visited Sophia before? The facility must have visitor logs." "I've requested those records," Alexander confirmed. "But given the high-profile patients they serve, the approval process takes time." Meanwhile, Emma continued to make progress, though she remained unsettled by Catherine's visit. The nightmares persisted, but she was increasingly able to articulate her feelings through her tablet and occasional spoken words. During their morning ritual of sunshine breakfast, she surprised both adults by asking a direct question. "Why does she look like Mommy but feel different?" Alexander exchanged a glance with Olivia, unsure how to answer. Olivia nodded encouragingly, her expression suggesting he should trust his instincts. "Sometimes people can look the same but have very different hearts," he explained carefully. "Your mum has a kind heart. She always thinks about how other people feel. I'm not sure Catherine does." Emma considered this, then typed, "Does she want to hurt us?" The directness of the question startled Alexander before he could formulate a response that would be honest without frightening his daughter. Emma continued typing. "She made the car crash." The electronic voice delivered this bombshell with neutral inflection, but the words sent a jolt through Alexander. "Emma, what do you mean?" Emma's small face contorted with the effort of finding words for complex memories. She abandoned the tablet and spoke haltingly. "In the car, 2 mummies, fighting." Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. 2 mummies? You mean you saw someone who looked like Mommy in the car that day?" Emma nodded emphatically, reaching for her drawing pad, a communication tool Olivia had introduced for expressing concepts too complex for her limited vocabulary. With focused determination, she drew a simple picture, a car with 3 stick figures inside. 1 small figure in the back, clearly Emma, and 2 identical figures in the front, their arms extended toward each other. "Emma," Olivia said gently, "this is very important. Are you saying there was someone who looked like your mom in the car when the accident happened?" Another emphatic nod. Emma added to her drawing, giving one of the front figures a smile and the other a frown, her shorthand for expressing character. Alexander felt his world tilting on its axis. "But that's impossible. Sophia was alone with Emma that day. I was in New York on business." Emma shook her head vigorously, her frustration at not being fully understood evident in her expression. She returned to her tablet, typing with deliberate focus, "Not Mommy and Mommy, Mommy and her." The implication was clear and horrifying. Emma was suggesting that Catherine had been in the car the day of the accident, an accident that had left Sophia comatose and Emma paralyzed. But why wouldn't the police report mention another passenger? Alexander wondered aloud. And where did she go after the crash? Emma was becoming agitated now, tears welling in her eyes as she struggled to communicate something beyond her current capabilities. Olivia intervened with practiced calm. "Emma, you're being so brave telling us this. Would it help to draw more pictures of what happened that day? Sometimes it's easier to show than tell." For the next hour, Emma worked diligently on a series of drawings, while Alexander called his lawyer to request the complete police and medical reports from the accident. Not just the summaries he'd received, while focused on Sophia's and Emma's immediate medical needs. The drawings, when completed, told a disturbing story. 2 identical women arguing in the front seat of the car, one grabbing at the steering wheel, the car swerving. Then the aftermath with only Emma and her mother remaining, the second woman gone from the scene. "If what Emma is suggesting is true," Alexander said quietly to Olivia, while Emma rested after the emotionally exhausting session, "it would mean Catherine was not only present during the accident, but may have caused it, and then fled the scene. And now she's back," Olivia added grimly. "The question is, why now? After 2 years? The trust fund," Alexander realized suddenly. "Sophia's medical trust becomes partially accessible next month. the 2-year mark. It was structured that way for tax purposes, on our lawyer's advice. He ran a hand through his hair. If Catherine could establish herself as Sophia's closest blood relative, she might be able to influence decisions about those funds. Olivia's expression grew troubled. Alexander, if she's willing to harm her own sister for financial gain, then Emma and Sophia both need protection, he finished grimly. I'm calling the private security firm right now to place guards at Sophia's facility, and I want you to stay with Emma at all times. As Alexander made arrangements for enhanced security, Olivia worked with Emma on techniques to feel safe, code words, emergency contacts programmed into her tablet, and simple physical boundaries that helped her feel more in control. The child's resilience continued to amaze both adults, her determination to communicate what she had witnessed, pushing her past limitations that had once seemed insurmountable. That evening, Alexander received a concerning call from the medical facility. Catherine had attempted to visit Sophia, claiming to be conducting a family medical history review with the doctor's knowledge. The staff, following Alexander's recently updated instructions, had denied her access, but reported that she had become belligerent, threatening legal action for being denied access to her twin sister. She's getting desperate, Alexander told Olivia after relaying the incident, which makes her more dangerous. Olivia nodded, her usual professional calm tinged with genuine concern. We should consider temporarily relocating. Emma senses the tension and it's affecting her progress. I've been thinking the same thing, Alexander admitted. I have a lake house in Wisconsin, private, secluded, with good security infrastructure. We could leave tomorrow. The decision made, they began discreet preparations, telling only Rebecca, Alexander's trusted household manager, about their plans. By morning, the essential items were packed in Alexander's least conspicuous vehicle, with arrangements made for additional security to follow at a distance. As they prepared to leave, Alexander received an urgent message from his investigator. The police report from the accident had been located, and it contained a detail that had been omitted from the summary. A witness at the scene had reported seeing a woman matching Sophia's description walking away from the crash, seemingly uninjured. The witness's statement had been discounted since Sophia had been found unconscious in the driver's seat, and the witness had been unable to provide additional details when officers followed up. She was there, Alexander said, showing Olivia the report. Emma was telling the truth. Catherine was in the car, caused the crash, and then walked away, leaving her sister and niece to die. The confirmation of Emma's account sent a wave of cold fury through Alexander. This woman had destroyed his family once and was now back to threaten them again. As they loaded the final bags into the SUV, he made a call to his lawyer, instructing him to prepare documentation for a restraining order based on the new evidence. Emma, settled in her specialized car seat, clutched Ellie the elephant with one hand and held Olivia's fingers with the other. Her expression was solemn but determined, a stark contrast to the empty-eyed child she had been just weeks earlier. "Ready for our adventure?" Olivia asked her with gentle enthusiasm. Emma nodded, then spoke in a clear, deliberate voice. "Away from the bad lady." "That's right," Alexander confirmed, meeting his daughter's eyes in the rear-view mirror. "We're going somewhere safe." As they pulled out of the garage, Alexander noticed a car parked across the street, a rental according to the barcode on the windshield. Though he couldn't see the driver clearly, instinct told him Catherine was watching the house. Rather than confront her directly, he followed the escape route his security team had prepared, using a service exit that led to a secondary street. The 3-hour drive to the lake house passed without incident. Emma, who had previously found car travel distressing due to accident-related trauma, remained calm with Olivia beside her, engaging in quiet games and listening to gentle music. By the time they arrived at the secluded property, the tension that had gripped them in Chicago had begun to dissipate. The lake house was more modest than the Chicago mansion, but still luxurious, with wide windows overlooking the water and an open floor plan that made it easy to keep Emma in sight. Accessible features had been installed years earlier, when Alexander's father had used a wheelchair following a stroke, making it unexpectedly well-suited to Emma's needs. As Olivia helped Emma settle into her new temporary room, Alexander received a concerning call from Rebecca. "Catherine came to the house demanding to see Emma," she reported. "When I informed her that you were away on business, she became unstable. She claimed that as Sophia's sister, she had a right to see her niece and accused us of hiding Emma from her. Security escorted her off the property, but she was making threats about going to the authorities with claims of child endangerment. Documented everything? Alexander asked tersely. Video and audio, Rebecca confirmed. She didn't realize our security system records all interactions at the entrance. I've sent the files to your secure server. Good work. Forward copies to my lawyer as well. Alexander ended the call, his concern deepening. Catherine was escalating more quickly than anticipated, suggesting she might be operating on some kind of deadline. That evening, as Emma slept peacefully under Olivia's watchful eye, Alexander reviewed all the information they had gathered about Catherine Wilson. Something still didn't add up. If her motivation was financial, why focus so intently on Emma? The child had no control over Sophia's medical trust, unless there was something else, something beyond money. On instinct, he searched his email for the complete medical reports from after the accident. Buried in the neurologist's detailed assessment of Sophia's condition was a single paragraph that suddenly took on new significance. Patient exhibits signs consistent with intentional pharmaceutical sedation prior to trauma. Blood work shows traces of benzodiazepines not prescribed to patient. This may have contributed to loss of consciousness preceding the collision. Recommend toxicology follow-up and possible investigation. Alexander stared at the screen, ice forming in his veins. The implications were staggering. If Sophia had been drugged before getting behind the wheel, the accident took on an entirely different character. Not just a momentary struggle for control of the vehicle, but a premeditated attack. But why? What could possibly motivate someone to harm their own identical twin and an innocent child? As Alexander pondered this disturbing question, his phone chimed with an alert. The security system at the Chicago mansion had detected an intrusion attempt, someone trying to access the house through a rarely used service entrance. The camera footage showed a hooded figure, face obscured but build and movements consistent with Catherine. She wasn't giving up. Whatever drove her, money, obsession, or something darker, Catherine Wilson was determined to insert herself into their lives. And now, with Emma's revelations and the mounting evidence, Alexander was equally determined to protect what remained of his family from this threat, masquerading as long-lost kin. Dawn broke over the lake with a serene beauty that belied the tension of the previous day. Alexander, who had spent most of the night reviewing security feeds and speaking with his legal team, found Emma and Olivia already awake, sharing breakfast on the deck overlooking the water. "Daddy," Emma called out when she saw him, a clear, deliberate greeting that would have been cause for celebration under different circumstances. "Look at the ducks." Alexander joined them, momentarily setting aside his concerns to appreciate his daughter's continued progress. A family of mallards glided across the glassy surface of the lake, their passage leaving perfect V-shaped ripples. "They're beautiful," he agreed, accepting the mug of coffee Olivia offered. "Did you sleep well in your new room?" Emma nodded, then surprised him by adding, "No bad dreams." Over breakfast, Alexander observed the easy rapport between Olivia and Emma, the gentle corrections when Emma struggled with a word, the shared smiles at inside jokes he wasn't privy to, the natural flow of their interaction. In just a few weeks, Olivia had become an essential part of their world, creating a sense of normalcy that had been absent since the accident. "I need to make some calls," he told them after finishing his coffee. "Will you two be okay exploring the property for a bit? The security team is stationed at the perimeter." "We'll be fine," Olivia assured him. Emma wants to collect pine cones for an art project. In his makeshift office, Alexander connected with his investigator, who had uncovered disturbing new information about Catherine Wilson. "She was institutionalized briefly as a teenager," the investigator reported. "Records are sealed, but I found a reference in an old newspaper article about a fire at her adoptive family's home. No casualties, but substantial evidence it was deliberately set." "Any connection to Sophia back then?" "None that I can find. The adoptive families lived in different states. But here's where it gets interesting. Catherine legally changed her name from Wilson to Bennett 6 months ago." Alexander felt a chill run through him. "She took my last name." "Appears so. She's been using Catherine Bennett on credit applications, job inquiries, even a lease agreement for an apartment 3 blocks from your Chicago residence." The implications were disturbing. This wasn't just about financial gain. Catherine had been constructing an identity connected to Alexander's family long before making her presence known. "There's more," the investigator continued. "I tracked down the witness from the accident scene, the one who reported seeing a woman walking away. She's a nurse who works near where the crash occurred. When shown photos of Sophia and Catherine side by side, she positively identified Catherine as the woman she saw leaving, noted the harder expression as the distinguishing feature. What about the toxicology follow-up mentioned in Sophia's medical report, the benzodiazepines? Working on that. Hospital records show the test was ordered but results were never filed. I'm trying to track down the lab technician who handled the sample." After ending the call, Alexander stared out at the peaceful lake scene, watching as Olivia helped Emma navigate her wheelchair along the pebbled path that circled the property. His daughter was laughing, actually laughing, as Olivia pretended to lose her balance while carrying an enormous pine cone. The scene crystallized something in his mind. Whatever Catherine's motives, he would not allow her to threaten this fragile happiness his daughter had reclaimed. With renewed determination, he contacted his security team to implement enhanced protocols and began preparations for a more permanent legal solution to the Catherine problem. By late afternoon, Emma had tired from their outdoor activities. Olivia settled her for a nap while Alexander reviewed the security footage from the Chicago mansion. Catherine had made another attempt to enter the property, this time confronting the guard directly with claims of being Mrs. Bennett, who had forgotten her key. When denied entry, she had become irate, threatening legal action before finally departing. "She's unraveling," Alexander observed when Olivia joined him in the study after ensuring Emma was asleep. "Each rejection seems to push her closer to some kind of breaking point." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "From a psychological perspective, this behavior suggests more than opportunism. There's an obsessive quality to it, as if she's convinced herself she has a right to your family." The investigator discovered she legally changed her name to Bennett 6 months ago, Alexander revealed. "She's been creating a false identity connected to us for longer than we realized." "That's deeply concerning," Olivia said, her professional demeanor temporarily giving way to genuine alarm. "It suggests she's constructed an elaborate fantasy around assuming Sophia's life." Before Alexander could respond, his phone rang with an urgent call from the security team at Sophia's medical facility. "Mr. Bennett, there's been an incident," the head of security reported. "A woman matching Catherine Wilson's description attempted to enter Mrs. Bennett's room disguised as medical staff. When questioned, she fled the premises. We've increased security and alerted local police, but thought you should be informed immediately." After ending the call, Alexander relayed the information to Olivia, his concern evident. "She's growing more desperate. If she's willing to risk criminal charges by impersonating medical personnel, she might be dangerous to all of you," Olivia finished grimly. "Have you considered speaking with law enforcement about Emma's memories of the accident? With the witness statement and the evidence of drugging, there might be enough to open an investigation." Alexander nodded. "My lawyer is arranging a meeting with a detective who specializes in cold cases. But the process takes time, and I'm concerned about what Catherine might do in the interim." As evening approached, Emma awoke from her nap and joined them for a quiet dinner on the deck. Despite the adult's underlying tension, the child seemed more relaxed than she had been in Chicago, responding to questions with increasing verbal confidence and even initiating conversation about the wildlife she had observed during their morning exploration. After dinner, Emma requested a dance party, a ritual that had become increasingly important to her emotional well-being. Alexander and Olivia readily agreed, grateful for the opportunity to create joyful normalcy amid the stress. As they moved furniture aside in the lake house's spacious living room, Emma selected music using her tablet's specialized interface. The scene that unfolded was one of simple happiness. Emma in her wheelchair, moving her arms and upper body to the rhythm. Alexander, his tie discarded and sleeves rolled up, performing the exaggerated dance moves that never failed to elicit his daughter's laughter. And Olivia, graceful and uninhibited, creating a circle of movement around them both. During a particularly energetic song, none of them noticed the figure watching through the large picture window that overlooked the deck. It wasn't until the music shifted to a slower melody that Alexander, turning to include Emma in a modified waltz, caught a glimpse of Catherine's face pressed against the glass, her expression a mask of fury and obsession. "Olivia," he said with forced calm, not wanting to frighten Emma, "take Emma to her room, please, right now." Olivia, catching his tone, immediately understood. Without alarming Emma, she smoothly suggested they continue their dance party in a special location and guided the wheelchair toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Once they were safely out of sight, Alexander moved swiftly to the security panel and activated the emergency lockdown protocol. Steel shutters began descending over the windows and exterior doors, a feature he had installed years ago as protection against both intruders and the violent storms that sometimes struck the area. Catherine, realizing what was happening, frantically tried the deck door, finding it already secured. As the shutter descended over the window where she stood, Alexander caught a final glimpse of her face, no longer making any attempt to mask her rage with the false charm she had initially presented. With the house secured, Alexander contacted the security team stationed at the property perimeter, directing them to apprehend Catherine. Then he moved quickly to check on Emma and Olivia, finding them in the master bedroom where the most robust security features were installed. "She's here, isn't she?" Olivia asked quietly, positioned protectively beside Emma's wheelchair. "The bad lady?" Alexander nodded, impressed by how calmly Olivia was handling the situation. "The security team is taking care of it. We're completely safe in here." Emma, however, was more perceptive than they had given her credit for. Her small face set with determination. She typed rapidly into her tablet, "She wants to hurt us like she hurt Mommy." The directness of the statement, delivered in the tablet's neutral electronic voice, hung in the air between them. Alexander knelt beside his daughter's wheelchair, meeting her eyes. "Emma, I promise you she will never hurt any of us." "I won't let that happen." Emma held his gaze with surprising steadiness. Then, in a clear voice that held more strength than he would have thought possible weeks earlier, she said, "I can tell the police what happened." In the car. The simple statement, delivered with such courage, filled Alexander with a complex mix of pride and sorrow. Pride in his daughter's bravery, sorrow that she had carried this burden alone for so long. "That would be very brave," he told her gently, "and it would help make sure the bad lady can't hurt anyone else." Their moment was interrupted by Alexander's phone ringing, the security team reporting that Catherine had evaded their initial perimeter search but appeared to still be on the property. They were conducting a systematic sweep and had contacted local law enforcement for additional support. For the next hour, they remained secured in the master bedroom, Olivia engaging Emma in quiet activities to maintain calm, while Alexander coordinated with security and police via phone. When a definitive knock finally came at the bedroom door, it was the property's head of security, confirming that Catherine had been apprehended attempting to access the boathouse. "Police have her in custody," he reported. "They found breaking and entering tools in her possession, along with—" He glanced meaningfully at Emma, indicating he didn't want to share all details in her presence. "Thank you, James," Alexander said. "Please let the officers know we'll provide full statements." As the immediate danger passed, the household began to return to normal, though security remained vigilant. Emma, exhausted by the emotional strain, fell asleep in her wheelchair, her head leaning against Olivia's shoulder. With gentle care, they transferred her to bed, Olivia staying beside her, while Alexander spoke with the police officers who had arrived to take statements. The items found in Catherine's possession painted a disturbing picture. Lockpicking tools, a stolen ID badge from Sophia's medical facility, and most alarmingly, syringes containing a sedative similar to the one found in Sophia's system after the accident. The implications were clear and deeply disturbing. Late that night, after providing detailed statements and ensuring Emma was sleeping peacefully under the watch of both Olivia and additional security, Alexander retreated to the deck to process the day's events. The lake was silver under the moonlight, its surface occasionally disturbed by night birds or jumping fish. He heard the deck door open behind him and turned to find Olivia approaching, wrapped in a cardigan against the night chill. "Emma's still sleeping," she reported softly. "No nightmares so far." "Thank you," Alexander said, the simple words encompassing far more than gratitude for this one night. "For everything you've done for her." "For us, sir." Olivia joined him at the railing, her presence somehow both professional and deeply personal. "She's an extraordinary child. Her courage today—" She shook her head in quiet amazement. Most adults wouldn't have handled that situation with such grace. She gets that from her mother, Alexander said, then corrected himself. From Sophia. The distinction wasn't lost on Olivia. The detective seemed confident they have enough to charge Catherine, especially once they compare her DNA to samples from the original accident investigation. It will be a long process, Alexander acknowledged, but at least she can't hurt anyone else while it unfolds. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the moonlight on the water. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice carrying a note of hesitation he hadn't heard before. "My contract was for 3 months," she said quietly, "to help Emma through her initial recovery phase. That time is almost up." Alexander felt an unexpected tightness in his chest at the thought of Olivia leaving. In the weeks since she had entered their lives, she had become essential, not just to Emma's well-being, but to his own sense of stability. "Stay," he said simply. "Not as an employee, as—" He paused, searching for the right words. "As whatever this is becoming." Olivia turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "I care deeply for Emma, and for you. But professional boundaries exist for a reason. If there's to be something more, we need to be certain it's real, not just gratitude or proximity or shared trauma. It's more than that," Alexander said with quiet certainty. "I think we both know it is." The moment hung between them, full of possibility. Then from inside the house came the sound of Emma's voice calling for Olivia, not in distress but with the confidence of a child who knows her call will be answered. "We should go to her," Olivia said, though she made no immediate move to leave. "Together," Alexander agreed, offering his hand. As they walked back into the house toward Emma's room where the child was awake and asking for a story, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced since before the accident, the sense of family, of belonging, of a future that held promise rather than just endurance. Emma smiled as they entered her room, unsurprised to see them arrive together. With the wisdom children sometimes possess, she patted the bed on either side of her, making space for both adults in her world. "Read the one about the broken things that get fixed," she requested, her voice stronger and more confident with each passing day. As Olivia reached for the book, a story about the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making it more beautiful for having been damaged. Alexander watched his daughter's face. The vacant expression that had haunted her features for 2 years was gone, replaced by engaged awareness and something approaching contentment. They had all been broken by the events of the past, some through malice, some through circumstance. But as they sat together in the peaceful quiet of the lake house, the future stretching before them full of challenges but also possibilities, Alexander realized that sometimes what emerges from brokenness is stronger and more beautiful than what existed before. Emma, sensing his thoughts in the way children sometimes do, reached for his hand. "We're okay now, Daddy," she said with simple certainty. "The bad part is over." Looking at his daughter's face, illuminated by moonlight and newfound hope, Alexander believed her. Whatever came next, Catherine's trial, Sophia's ongoing care, the evolving relationship with Olivia, they would face it together, a family created not by blood or circumstance, but by choice and love. Outside, the lake waters continued their eternal rhythm of gentle waves against the shore, a reminder that even after the most violent storms, peace eventually returns, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings and unexpected joy. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by Alexander, Emma, and Olivia's journey toward healing and hope. Their story reminds us that sometimes the family we choose is more powerful than the family we're born into, and that even in our most broken moments, redemption is possible. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more emotional journeys that explore the complexity of human relationships. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. We've created a special playlist with similar stories of healing and unexpected love that you can find by clicking the link to your left. Remember, every day brings new stories of courage and connection. Join our community of listeners who find strength and inspiration in these shared emotional experiences. We'll be waiting for you in the comments.